a lot of what attracted me to you is this idea of scientific humanism. And what I feel like what we do at Singularity is an attempt at that, to take the
Hmm.
power of science and technology to do some kind of positive humanistic change in the world. But I'd be really curious to know, and I just would love to hear your idea of what scientific humanism is. How would you define that? Why is it important to you? And if you can just expound upon it a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just using that term, scientific humanism. It could be secular humanism or enlightenment humanism or just humanism. Different groups use different words, but it's pretty much the derivative or the long-term child of the Enlightenment, in which we use reason, rationality, empiricism under the rubric of science or science and philosophy, natural philosophy, to try to answer questions not just about the physical world and the biological world, but also the social world, political world, economic world, cultural world, human behavior, right? I mean, the earliest scientists of human behavior were Enlightenment thinkers like David Hume and Adam Smith. And they were really early cognitive psychologists or social psychologists, really trying to answer questions about, like what's the origin of wealth? That was the title of Adam Smith's famous book. It was not The Wealth of Nations. That's not really the title. The full title is The Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. So it's a science book.
Hmm.
Where does this stuff come from? And why do we want to know? Because it's better if people have money than don't, right? And because they can live better lives, and it's better if prices are lower than higher for everybody, and and on and on. And what makes people happy? What makes them fulfilled? What kind of society should we structure? Is a democracy better than an autocracy? Of course, we all say, well, yeah, but why? Can you articulate why? Right? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that giving the devil his due. That's my previous latest book. The new one is on conspiracies, but we can get into that later. What I try to do there is just make a case for free speech and open dialogue about anything and everything as really the kind of foundational rights of all other rights, because all other rights are really derived through argumentation and reason, and this is why we should treat others a certain way. And the only way to find out if you're right about that is to talk to other people. So free speech is really behind everything else. And yet, the censoriousness on both the left and the right has been stunning in the last, say, 10 years that I've been, watching this since the 70s, really. And it was always the right, the religious right in particular, who were wanting to censor rock music and art and literature and so on. But the last decade or so, it's been the left. And so you have people like Tucker Carlson on Fox News defending free speech. Of course, the right is also censorious. Like they've been defenestrating books of late that have to do with trans and
Right.
racial issues and so on. So they're just as bad. But that nobody should be going down that road of censoring ideas, because it's the only way we can find out if we're on the road to truth or not.
Yeah. Do you think the enterprise of scientific humanism has led us to this place where it's actually started to undermine its own efforts in the realm of free speech? It seems like in a lot of ways this idea that everyone deserves a voice and it should hold equal weight, and the scientific development of social media and the internet has brought us to this place where now there's deep concerns about, should everyone have a voice? What about misinformation? What about things around vaccines or the state of democracy? Is this going in a direction where maybe it's starting to undermine itself and we have to actually start asking questions,
Yes.
if this is a pure value?
Well, that's always been the direction. If you look at the history of free speech going back thousands of years, um, governments and people in power always want to control people's thoughts and ideas and speech. Always.
Mm-hmm.
It's been one long struggle for thousands of years to let people, regular people, have a voice. That it doesn't come naturally for whatever reason. I'm not like this temperamentally. I don't want to be president, or I don't even want to be CEO. I don't want to be anything. I just like being just an individual. But for some reason, people get in power, and then all of a sudden they don't want other people thinking certain thoughts or saying certain words or sentences or whatever. And it's like, it's astonishing. It just happens almost like a law of nature, even in democracies.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's something that we have to fight for constantly, the eternal vigilance. line about those kinds of freedoms have to be fought for every generation, because there's nothing natural about it for whatever reason, having to do with human nature. So, that's why we have it built into the Constitution. But even that's not enough, because the First Amendment only protects you from the government censoring your speech. Of course, private corporations can do whatever they want. If Twitter wants to kick you off, they're free to do that. Should they? No. I find, much of what Trump has to say, or Alex Jones, pretty deplorable. And they lie and lie and lie. But I'm still against the censoring of them, or Joe Rogan, when he has on that Robert Malone talking about vaccines and what's that cardio condition where the heart gets enlarged because of vaccines. I forget what it's called, but
it starts with an M.
So people went crazy about that. Joe had him on. Well, you got to know what you're getting. This is not 60 Minutes with a team of researchers where he's going to ask all angles and get somebody else on the other side and interview them and edit it all together. He's just talking to people.
Right.
And and it's not hard to find. If you Google Malone and what's the arguments against him, you can find it. And so there are other shows that do that. And so I say, just let people have their say. And there's just an almost infinite number of sources online now where you can get good content. You may have to work at it a little bit, but the idea that there's some governing body that should tell podcasters who they can talk to on their shows, I don't know. Again, that's the natural impulse. I'm against it. I don't like that. I don't even think, again, I think Trump is pretty close to having incited violence on January 6th. Although my free speech attorney friends who know about the law on that say it's a pretty high bar to meet. It's hard to prove that something somebody said directly led to violence, right? So it may not be indictable for that particular thing. Nevertheless, I don't like that they kicked him off. Trump, it's good to know what he's thinking. Right. And, he's just a free associating Twitter machine at 2 a.m. Here's what Trump is thinking. Oh, it's good to know that, right? And so I say pretty much, there are limits, of course. We don't want somebody tweeting out the nuclear codes to our launch sites or national secrets or something like that. But we already have laws about that. So anyway.
Well, you're speaking there a lot, I would say, to the marketplace of ideas and letting the best ideas win out, and putting some impetus on the person to, understand that they're listening to Rogan rather than, academic research. But do you think in this age of bots and algorithms and attention economy, an addictive attention economy at that has a lot of, I would say, manipulation and proclivities towards outrage baked into the system, that once you enter this digital space, like the world of social media, you start really leaving behind a fair marketplace. Like, you're no longer in a place where free speech maybe has the same value because the marketplace just simply isn't a fair one anymore.
Yeah. Well, I know these arguments. Let's play this out for a second. So the argument is that companies like Twitter, as a kind of an open marketplace of conversations, are so powerful that it's not enough for the libertarians to say, hey, let the free market decide, and it could be 20 Twitters, and you pick which one. There aren't 20 Twitters. There's just one. And for whatever reason, they got a market head start over everybody else. And anyone that tries to create something like Twitter, they just never get very big. And I was talking to Andrew Yang about this, and he was complaining about Twitter, and it's like, yeah, well, why doesn't somebody like Elon Musk or Peter Thiel just start a new one? Well, rich people have. But as Andrew said, everybody's on Twitter. If you want to say something to everybody, you got to be on Twitter. If you go over to one of the other sites, it's 1/10 of the number of people are there, 1/100th or whatever. And I don't know how to change that. Short of the government regulating them and breaking them up, which I'm against. I don't know. It's just kind of the way it goes. And the only thing I could say is that, maybe Twitter and Instagram and so forth, they won't be like newspapers that last for centuries. It could just be, it's a fad. So before we take drastic censorial action with, the government breaking things up, let's just see how it plays out. There's some evidence. Well, we know that the tech companies have tweaked these algorithms to manipulate you to get you to stay on longer because that's their business model. Okay, well, you know that. You don't have to do it. No one's holding a gun to your head. You don't have to go on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You just close the computer and go do something else, right? You don't have to. So you're still free. No one's making you
Yeah.
do anything. So I don't see it as quite the same level as, say, drug addiction or, I don't know, alcoholism or gambling addiction or whatever. That word addiction, people are addicted to social media. Really? I mean, it's not the same.
Yeah.
And I think, but maybe I'm an old baby boomer and I don't get the, the FOMO and fear of being left out and all that stuff and how powerful that is on teenagers. Maybe that's true, but I think we need more research before we say definitively this is a problem and the government needs to step in and break these companies up or regulate them more. I'm not convinced of that yet.
Yeah, I mean, in that regard, in terms of how it's affecting the individual and more bringing it more specifically into your expertise in some way, how do you feel social media is impacting the way people think about conspiracy theories and kind of get inside their own little reality tunnels, in the words of Robert Anton Wilson? Like
Right.
people are constructing these feeds that cater directly to their ideas. Confirmation bias is going through the roof. You know, people can now find a community that supports them, hundreds of people who support their ideas, that no matter how crazy they are, where in the past they might have, struggled to find someone in their town who could support these ideas.
Yes, I write about that. So I'll give a plug to the
Yep.
new book, which I just got this copy. It just came out. So because we're a couple of weeks away from pub date here. But in the 60s, like say with the JFK assassination conspiracy theory, the theorists were mostly just in their basement or small little offices or hotel rooms meeting, or they kind of mimeograph little newsletters that they would pass out or physically mail, maybe a few hundred, a few thousand at most. And so now, of course, you can reach millions instantly in real time for free. So the difference isn't that this is new, it's that it's more effective, it's more efficient, it's economically more practical for people to do that. I mean, just think about, the 9/11 truth movement was largely given a big boost from that film Loose Change that was made by this young man, and basically in his dorm room, I guess, or wherever he was with his laptop. This was the first really laptop made, computer generated documentary that reached, I don't know, hundreds of millions of views. It's astonishing the amount of viewership that got. Michael Moore hasn't had that many views, right? Although Loose Change was free and online to watch. In Michael Moore's films are mostly in theaters at the time, but that really reached so many people. And even if it wasn't convincing, because he just kind of threw everything he could think of up against the wall. But people would go, well, wow, okay, so I know a lot of this is a bunch of baloney, but what if just 10% of it's true? Then there's something was up with the Bush administration and they knew it was going to happen and all that stuff. And so it takes quite a concerted effort. I mean, there are people that have gone through like every claim made in Loose Change, and they have like a 200-page document online you got to read to debunk it. So that's sort of the argument for censorship, is that you can say anything you want, but showing why it's wrong takes a lot of work. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. My opinion is, well, that's what we do at Skeptic. I mean, there's people that do this, or Snopes, or any of the fact checking sites. That's what they do. So just counter that with some other technology online, right? I mean, fact checking, this PolitiFact and Snopes and some of these others, they've really risen since Trump. And everyone's complaining about the lies, of course, politicians are always lying and dissembling and exaggerating and so on. Trump did it more, but now he's kind of forced people to launch this in real time while the politician is speaking. Somebody is fact checking, right, and posting, right online. It's like, this is great. It's sort of like when Neil deGrasse Tyson tweets about a movie he's watching that has something to do with physics or whatever, right? You can watch that and go, oh yeah, I saw that movie. Oh, I didn't notice that, right? Oh, God, this is all fine. This is part of the kind of changing culture.
How much do you think that fact checking makes it to the places it needs to be, though? Because I think of, we kind of, in the words of like Jonathan Haidt, we hijack the elephant and the rider just goes along. We make things emotionally salient, and then the individual just kind of takes it wherever it goes. So people aren't really looking for the facts as much as they're looking to be emotionally moved. So I don't know how many people are actually checking these things, like, what the work that you do in PolitiFact and all of that stuff.
Well, probably not enough. We probably need a lot more of that and deeper penetration, but okay. How do you do that? Well, again, but if you look at some of the concerns about the printing press or
Mm,
concerns about even books being published and mass produced, it was the same kind of argument. Oh my gosh, people are going to be negatively influenced by these books or films. That was another argument cultural critics made about movies, and then television, and now the internet, same arguments. The wrong people are going to see this, or it's going to influence people to do bad things. And well, who's going to decide that?
right.
You or me, or some thought police committee. This is not good. This is dangerous. It leads to a tyrannical government or programs that overreach inevitably.
Mm-hmm.
And even like the written word back in back in BC, the idea that we're going to lose our ability to employ our memories through these kind of long mnemonic devices that people use to remember things through these stories, or the oral tradition. And so when the written word came along, people were concerned. Oh, the kids these days, they're reading books. Oh no. No one says that anymore. Okay.
Right.
So again, I think, change is followed by more change. And rather than going backwards, let's just go forward and think of ways to solve specific problems.
Mm-hmm.
So say teenagers are having issues with fear of being left out or fear of missing out on Facebook. Okay, maybe there's a specific thing we could do with that particular problem, parental advice, or I don't know what. And instead of saying the internet is a problem, this is
Right.
too big an issue.
Yeah, in your years of, being a forerunning skeptic, how have you seen the realm of conspiracy kind of change as a result of the digital technology? Have you seen an increase in polarization or the contagion of ideas, or, people just simply becoming more radicalized and polarized?
Yeah, I do think it's more rapid and maybe more polarizing. Although if you look back 100 years ago, I have a discussion in my book about studies of the New York Times letters section, letters to the editor section, going back to the late 19th century. And people were very concerned about conspiracies then. Oh, the Jews are doing this, or the Mormons are doing that. The Catholics are up to no good. They're trying to get power, and so on. And that's old. That's as old as really probably civilization. And the reason is because there are conspiracies,
Yeah.
right? So conspiracy theories are ideas about possible real conspiracies. And the problem, I call this constructive conspiracism. The problem is that a lot of conspiracy theories turn out to be true. So it kind of pays to be a little paranoid, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they really are out to get you. Now, not always. So you have to, take each one individually, but it probably pays to be a little bit paranoid that way. So people naturally have always been that way. And, so that's old. It's just speeded up. I would say the
Mm-hmm.
internet speeds it up. Are we more polarized? Apparently, yes. There's research on this. The number of people self-identifying as centrist, or just to the left of center, or just to the right of center, that cohort is shrinking. The number of people on the far left and far right, or who self-identify as progressive on the left, or more radical right, those are increasing. Okay. And apparently political scientists have studied this. How much time do politicians across the aisle spend with each other, like on the weekends?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm told that back in the day, congressmen and senators who otherwise were against each other would meet on the weekends, and their kids would go to the soccer game or whatever, and they'd all hang out, and they were friendly to each other. And apparently that doesn't happen much anymore. And also the politicians tend to go home on the weekends to their home state, where they fundraise and do other things, and so they don't meet with the people on the other parties in the other party. And so that makes it worse. And then talk radio, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Conservative talk radio and talk, really, television on both sides. Probably, I think maybe conservatives are slightly worse, more polarizing than say MSNBC. But it's still bad on both sides, right?
Yeah.
It's not just that these people are differ from me, or they have a different opinion about abortion or immigration or whatever. They're wrong, and not just wrong, but immoral,
Yeah.
right? They want to destroy America.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. You know, so if I believe in this percentage of upper cap of income tax, or that percentage of how many immigrants we're going to accept every year, Biden just said it at, I think, 125,000 a year. Well, what if I said it should be 100,000? Do I hate America? Or if I think it should be 200,000, do I hate America? Come on. It's just a normal debate.
Yeah. I feel like that's a cognitive distortion that people get warned against in things like cognitive behavioral therapy. You don't want to catastrophize.
Catastrophize. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point from Heights and Greg Lukianoff's book, The
Hmm.
Colony of the American Mind. Right. Yeah. I like that section because Greg had some issues that he, with depression, I think it was, he used cognitive behavior therapy. He writes about that in the book. And yeah, catastrophizing is one of them, where
Yeah.
everything is a complete disaster. Right.
It feels like
Yeah. I'd say there's
society is.
political catastrophizing.
Exactly, exactly. Well, using that skeptical lens again of yours, and looking instead at the perhaps overly positive views of technology rather than some of the pessimistic views of technology, what do you think about the world maybe right now of techno optimism, of the singularitarians, the people who are perhaps blind to the shortcomings of technology and believe it's going to create a utopia? Do you have a certain bone to pick with that kind of philosophy where you
Mm.
see a short-sightedness?
Yeah, I see you have Ray's book there on your shelf, just over your right shoulder.
It's
The
probably right next
Singularity
to
is
yours
near.
somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, how near is it? Ray, you keep
Keeps
pushing
moving.
that date back. I don't know if it is coming, if there's a there. It's hard to say. I mean, we know from research on people that study forecasting, like professional forecasters, that more than 5 years out into the future, no one's better than random chance at
Mhm.
guessing what's going to happen on any specific or general trend. So, something big is going to happen in 25 years, maybe, maybe not. Who knows? I mean, maybe it's something that we can't even think of. Had you asked people in the 60s, by the 90s and 2000s, what are going to be the biggest things? Well, people did ask that. And almost nobody said, well, there's going to be this thing called the World Wide Web. It's the internet. There's going to be online traffic. The entire economy is going to be. I mean, no one thought that would happen, or even the fall of the Soviet Union, like the year before.
Yep.
Even expert political scientists and people that study the Soviet Union, almost nobody saw this coming, right? So I don't know. On the other hand, I like Ray. I like the Singularity University, the singularitarian philosophy, the kind of techno optimism. By temperament, I like that.
Hmm.
To me, I think the solution is let's go forward and solve problems with better science and technology. That's
Yeah.
almost always better than some other solution, where it usually involves the government doing something big and interventionistic to slow everything down. I say just go forward, and if there's a problem, then we can deal with it then, right? AI is going to lead to some existential crisis. Maybe,
Yeah.
probably not. It's not going to turn us all into paper clips, okay? But if it does, if it looks like, the day before, you just pull the plug, just stop it.
Yeah.
It's, or Elon Musk's cars are going to drive, auto drive into a crowd of people on the sidewalk. Yeah, well, if that happened, how long will it be before the regulators are at Elon's office going, you're not doing this anymore, right? Government's quite good at regulating business, and they have the power of the gun to stop businesses. So let Elon and these the other companies now just do whatever they want, and
Yeah.
let's see how it goes. And just monitor it day by day, month by month, and just I have a Tesla. I don't use the the driver assist very often because it's
Hmm.
not reliable. I think we're a long ways away from that. But I'd say let's keep trying. It's
Hmm.
just a hard problem to solve, rather than overly regulate it and cancel it. And in general, I think if you look at the long-term trends, I did this in the last chapter of the moral arc, kind of that Star Trek vision. Let's look 500 years, 5,000 years into the future. Maybe there'll be no more nation states. Maybe it's just all porous borders where everybody trades with everybody. Maybe a Trekonomics kind of scenario where everybody is incredibly wealthy, due to digital technology, and there's a pretty much infinite number of solutions to problems, and we can just continue growing the economy. That it's not a zero sum game. As we say, as somebody said, we didn't leave the Stone Age because we ran out of stones. We just found better solutions. And I'm fond of that thought experiment, that we will never run out of fossil fuels. We'll never run out of oil. People scratch their heads like, how could that be? We live on a finite planet, and the answer is supply and demand. Once the supply of oil starts to really dry up, the price will go so high no one will want to buy it anymore, and we'll find other solutions like, I don't know, electric cars. How's that for a solution, right?
Yeah.
And I know the electricity is mostly coming from fossil fuel driven power plants. It's not coming from the electric ferry in my wall. Right? But nuclear, right? Just again, nuclear power is so overregulated that it hasn't been allowed to go through the technological evolution that other technologies have, such that it should be now so cheap and easy to build these nth generation nuclear power plants. There are some that are available now, but it's so overtly regulated. Part of it is because of fears of something catastrophic happening like Chernobyl. But Chernobyl can't happen with the new generation of nuclear power plants. Or 3 Mile Island, which is not nearly as bad as people thought it was. Nobody died. And not even very many people died from Chernobyl. I mean, that wasn't nearly the disaster. They were saying millions of people, are going to die. No, that didn't happen. And that's the worst of it, right? So again, going forward, let's really lean into more science and technology. So I like, the kind of Kurzweilian view of things in the future. A lot of libertarians. There's a lot of people in that community that are libertarians. That's good. I'm kind of like that. I lean that way. And but you can always kind of ratchet back if you have to. It's hard to go forward. We have to allow people to fail and keep trying and trying and trying in order to get the innovation, right?
Yeah. So are there any domains at all that you're currently kind of like, having said all that, I still kind of think maybe we shouldn't do X?
Well, I don't know. Let's think. I mean, the things I guess most worried about would be nuclear weapons, but we've really cut back on those, but we need to cut back another order of magnitude. So there's only a few hundred. I don't think we can get to nuclear zero because of the security dilemma. They always, what's called the other guy problem. There's always going to be some Putin or some Kim Jong-un out there that has 1 or 10 or 100. So you got to have 1 or 10 or 100 and so on. But once you get below 10,000 or say below 1,000, you've really obviated the problem of nuclear winter, or just, catastrophe for, hundreds of millions or even billions of people. That's what we want to avoid. Climate change, I'm not as I don't think of it as an existential threat as much as some people. I mean, I think it's real, human cause and so on. I think we have the time to do something about it. I think the effects are real and happening, but that just, in other words, again, let's just find solutions to carbon sequestration and using other sources than fossil fuels. Let's just do that. And, and design our systems to make them safer in a future warmer world, that kind of thing. As opposed to let's have fewer people, although that is happening naturally, and let's cut back and use less technology. No, technology is good, right? Also, one other thing, there's kind of a resentment against wealth. Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or whoever, and that's natural. I understand why, but what this is called the survivorship bias, right? We see the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs success stories, and people write biographies of them, as if the model is to go to a liberal arts or a really expensive college and then drop out and then move back to your parents' house and then build a startup in your garage. And then you get bought out and pretty soon you're Google or Apple or Microsoft. Well, yeah, we know about those, but how many guys in the 70s dropped out of college, went back to their parents' house, and they didn't do anything, or they started a company and went out of business? Most of them go out of business. I'm told it's like 1 out of 100 are funded by venture capitalists, and out of the 100 that they fund, only like 1 out of 100 becomes Google or Apple. I mean, the odds are just stacked against you.
Yeah.
So from a society, we want that one person to make it, because look, we get a smartphone for that. Yay, that's great. And the other ones that went bust, I don't even know who they are. And well, that's
Hmm.
tough luck. You took your chances. Good for you. And if you didn't succeed, well, that's the way it goes.
Yeah, do you want to see a world in which I guess the disparity between the wealthy and the poor though is maybe assuaged by technology? I mean, do you think that's a direction we're going and that you think would be beneficial to us?
I think the gap is probably real and will continue, or maybe even get worse if
Mm,
we follow the trends we've been doing that I've said are good. So the solution is not bring down the people on the top to close the gap. The solution is pull the people up on the bottom to get closer to those at the top. Well, I don't care about the people at the top. There aren't that very many. There's like 100 people that are, that own all that wealth or whatever. I don't care about them. I care about the middle class, the working class. You just pull them all up, so that everybody makes the equivalent of, I don't know, $100,000 a year today in today's dollar. That's the better solution than that. Let's really hammer those, top 0.001 percenters, and then what? They don't have that much money. Whereas if you just did a straight wealth transfer
yeah.
to the lower 1% or whatever, it's going to pull them up. There's not that much wealth at the top. So you'd have to do it through some kind of programs or whatever. Okay. I think let's just figure out a way to encourage companies to pay their lower price workers through changing norms, right? So I like John Mackey's Conscious Capitalism. John Mackey's
Mm,
the CEO of Whole Foods. He's
yeah.
a good friend of mine, and he's a smart cookie, and he's a hardcore libertarian, but he's also very conscientious about the environment and people and society and the communities that his stores are in. And his conscious capitalism program includes a cap on the top salaries of
Mm,
his company. They can't earn more than 19 times the lower worker wages, right?
wow.
Whereas at Disney or whatever, it's, like 500 times more, a
Yeah.
thousand times more than the average worker. That's just so obscene, right? So, and he's not, no one's making him do that. And he's encouraging other CEOs to do the same thing. And some of them are. And then it'll give back to the community, the neighborhood you're in. Your store is not going to flourish as much if there's a bunch of homeless people
Right.
on the perimeters of your store. It's better that those people are taken care of. It's better for everybody, including your bottom line. I think that's the kind of attitude that would be effective.
Yeah, more expendable income with the masses means more money towards all the people who are trying to earn it as well.
In a way, that has happened. If you look at, like, say, the last 500 years,
Mm,
the rate of poverty is defined as less than, what is it, $1.90 a day or $2 a day or something
yeah.
like that. I don't know, a century and a half ago, it was like 90% of humanity was impoverished and only 10% were above the poverty line. Now it's the reverse. I think it's 9 or 8.5, 9% right now. Not that making $3 a day makes you, okay or successful, but but however you want to define it, the UN just defines it a certain way. But there's far fewer people and a much smaller percentage of people up below that. So something has happened. Let's
Right.
do more of that.
Yeah. Speaking of kind of this, I guess, humanistic look at the way the world's improved, one thing that I was thinking about when preparing for this interview was how, in the world of instant communication, with so much access to information, it feels like we're developing a self-defeating pessimism about humanity. And specifically, I think of Steven Pinker and his work. I think it was in Enlightenment Now. And instead of embracing his work with gratitude for how far we've come, everyone wanted to tear him down with hostility for being so naive and privileged. And it feels like there's this reluctance to savor our humanistic wins as a society. Do you see that as
Oh
well?
yeah, totally. Yeah, Steve's a good friend of mine. He's one of my best friends, and I know his work intimately. And this is the last guy who should be accused of that, because first, he's massively data driven.
Hmm.
He's not a Pollyannish. I think, in my opinion, things are better. Well, good for you. I think they're worse. I mean, he actually just presents the data. Here it is. If that's not better than it used to be, if 90% impoverished is reduced to less than 10% impoverished, if that's not progress, I don't know what is. It's just a number. You
Yeah.
can call it whatever you want. But he's also pretty liberal. Steve is, and he gives a lot of money to the Democratic Party, supports Democratic candidates, and and other causes like this. I mean, he's pro-choice. He's free speech. He's right down the barrel of kind of old school liberalism. So he actually calls this problem progressophobia.
Mm,
There's something built into well, first of all, if you have a nonprofit and you're trying to raise money to solve some problem, you can't say things are better in almost almost done and expect to raise money. You got to say things are bad and getting worse. But if you give us money, we're going to we're going to make America great again, right? Or
yeah.
the environment great again, or something, whatever. So you have to, kind of exaggerate the problem. So that's part of it. Also, the availability heuristic. We only notice the bad things more than
Mm,
because they're readily available in our environment and on the news. And then, kind of putting into context the negativity bias. We notice negative things more than positive things for good evolutionary reasons, because those are the things that could take you out of the gene pool. So you have to pay attention to
right.
those. So there's a bunch of reasons why people don't. And for some really weird reason, people seem to think that pessimists and, existential crisis type opinion editorialists are smarter than those who say things are getting better, who are described as Pollyannish and naive
Mm.
and not as smart. It's like, this is crazy, but that's kind of the reception of it.
Yeah. Well, as we think about the way tech is progressing, I don't want to switch topics too much here, but you have such a wide breadth that you explore. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how religion and atheism play into all of this, and specifically, as tech is advancing, as things are improving, as we're moving towards this world where maybe AI does run a lot of things, where the work that you covered in Heavens on Earth with immortality really becomes a real thing. Do you see religion starting to get pushed into the fringes, or do you think maybe new religions will develop that are that worship the AI gods, or who
Yeah.
knows what?
Yeah. I was there at the Singularity conference. I think it was 2015. It was the one in New York City,
Okay.
right during the Wall Street, what was
Mm.
that movement?
Occupy.
Yeah, the Occupy Wall
Yeah.
Street movement, whatever year that was. And Ray Kurzweil gave his "I Have a Dream" speech, and it was very motivational. But I have to say, I almost felt like I was back in church. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this guy's like the Messiah.
Yep.
And we are the chosen generation. We're the ones that get to live forever. And it's like, well, okay, maybe, but I've heard this before
Yeah.
when I was religious, right? So there are certain I don't know, parallels, I guess, to religion. I don't know about using that metaphor too much, because
Mm.
most religions have a godhead, and I don't think secular humanism is quite like that.
Mm.
But I do think that people need community
Mm.
and social capital. Bowling leagues, as that book says. The what was it called? Not bowling alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
The decline of social groups like that is harmful to people. I think that's true. People want to belong to things. So as the number of nuns rises, people with no religious affiliation, which is happening rapidly, it's huge. Like, in the early 90s, I think it was like less than 5 to 7% were nuns, and maybe 1 or 2% atheists. Now it's like 30 to 40%. Well, it's about 30% overall, maybe 40% for millennials, and Gen Z is maybe 50% have no
Mm.
religious affiliation. Now, they're not necessarily atheists, but if they follow anything, maybe it's more like spiritual but not religious, or Deepak Chopra kind of, Western Buddhism. I
Mm.
meditate every day, and okay, that's a kind of religious spirituality or something, whatever you want to call it. Or they belong to some, cause, like, what you're doing, Singularity, that, belonging to that almost feels like I'm working toward this thing that's bigger than me.
Mm.
It's kind of, long term. It has kind of a moral component to it, progress, that, the far future is going to be better. That's kind of quasi religious in a way, but there's nothing wrong with that, because it's tapping into something in human nature where we want to belong to some group, and we want to feel like our efforts count for something in the long run. Like the difference between happiness and meaningfulness, right? Happiness tends to be more short term, and activities that bring immediate pleasure, like a dinner with friends tonight. Well, that'll be really fun, and it makes me happy to be with my friends, have a good meal. But the next day, it's over.
Mm,
Now what, right? But I go to work now. I'm going to write a book, or I'm going to do this issue of Skeptic, and this could change things down the road. That makes me, whether it does or not, makes me feel like I'm working toward the far future. Or example I often give, take caretaking for my parents who are all gone now, but I had 4 parents, 2 step parents. 3 of the 4 I did kind of care for, and
mm,
it wasn't fun. It didn't make me happy. It wasn't pleasurable, right? But it made me feel like a better person. I would want somebody to do this for me. They did a lot for me. I want to, pay back, and just a lot of really positive things like that. And psychologists who study this say, yeah, it's way more meaningful to do a long term activities, sort of back into time, like how has my life changed over the decades, and where am I going in the far future with my
yeah.
life and my society? What can I do to make the world a little bit better? Those are the kinds of things. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be religion or a nonprofit or some kind of social group or something that's working for that. Manning the soup kitchens, or I don't know, effective altruism, or building a better AI that's going to help everybody. That's good, and that makes
Yeah.
people feel better.
So you see that religious instinct shifting away from maybe a god to more about community and shared
Yeah.
goals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love the kind of sci-fi scenarios of colonizing the galaxy. We're going to Mars, well,
Hmm.
maybe we are. That is pretty cool. Right. And, I've written about this, what kind of government are we going to have on Mars? Have you thought about that? We should think this through. We should do it, but we should think it through. Right.
Hmm.
And then from there, you bounce out to the other moons of Jupiter and Saturn. And from there, you go to Proxima Centauri and wherever there are planets that are Earth size, roughly speaking, to the local
Yeah.
stars. Maybe this is 10,000 years or 100,000 years, but on a cosmic time scale, that's nothing.
Hmm.
Right. We could populate the entire galaxy probably within 100,000 years or million years or something like that. But again, a million years, nothing compared to
Yeah.
the cosmic time scale. So even just thinking about that almost makes me feel like I felt when I was religious, like, wow,
Mm.
this is like cosmic and in scale. Wow, deep
Yeah.
time, deep space. Yeah. So
Part
I
of
think
something bigger than yourself.
yes,
Yeah.
that's the whole thing. Right.
That makes me think. I know at one point you talked about how your wife is from Cologne or Cologne, however
Yeah.
people want to pronounce it. Um, and in her cultural background, it's much more tight, and people are kind of more rigid and rule oriented, whereas you are more loose and kind of whatever
Mm.
happens kind of thing. How do you think that dynamic is going to play out as we move forward, between different countries developing technology with these different perspectives, and if there's going to be some kind of, I guess, reconciliation that has to take place?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Let's see. We're talking about Michelle Gelfin's research on cultural psychology, tight and
Mm,
loose
yep.
cultures. I mean, you have to have some tightness, right? You have to have
Mm,
some laws and rules that people obey, or else any society will fall apart.
yeah.
So you can't live in that kind of individualistic, uber libertarian or anarcho-capitalist type structure. That's too loose. I think you
Hmm.
need some structure. Most people do, and so there again, if we're going to send a group of people to Mars and they're going to live there and start building a new community, they got to have rules.
Yep.
What happens if the air gets low and we run out of water? You can't just hoard it. And it's to be some distribution system. So you need some kind of set of rules there, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, just kind of a curious thought. Um, as we come up on time here, I want to kind of ask one just like kind of Hail Mary question, and get your opinion as a proper skeptic. What do you think about the simulation theory? How many
Uh,
holes do you think it has?
well, it's entirely based on this thought experiment that, the Copernican principle, we're not special. So that means we're probably not the first to achieve intelligence and technological capacity to build computers. And if we're in the middle, half are ahead of us, half are below us. Assuming we're not alone in the cosmos, somebody has to be first, I guess, but chances are it's not us. So they're out there somewhere, and someone, take Moore's law, extrapolate it out. Somebody will have done what we did, and maybe they did that 10,000 years ago, and
Hmm.
they've done, that pace of Moore's law increasing instead of for 50 years, for 50,000 years, and now they're building, perfect matrix like holodecks, Maybe. Okay. But at some point, is there any evidence for this? No, none. It's just purely a thought experiment. And, I'm not a philosopher, and probably this is why, it's like you can really go far down the rabbit hole with just
Yeah.
thought experiments. And to me, it's good to once in a while, look out the window, see what's actually out there. Is there any buffering? Are there any delays in conversations with people? I'm standing at the McDonald's across the street, and all of a sudden the person buffers out and they blink out and they come back in, and whoa, what was that? That
Yeah.
never happens, right? And I'm told by, I don't know that much about this, but I had David Chalmers on my show, and he wrote a whole book about this. And even he said there's no way to test it. It's
Hmm.
purely thought experiment, but that at some point you would need, because you could have simulations on top of simulations. You have a simulation in the simulation, but at some point you need hardware, right? You need an actual computer that the stuff runs on. And so at some point you'd run out of computing power, even if you had the entire universe. That's not enough for an infinite number of simulations. So you would have glitches
Yeah.
in the system, and we never see that. So in my opinion, I guess it's fun. It's a sci-fi scenario. It makes for a good Star Trek episode,
Yep.
like the ship in the bottle one, my favorite example of that.
Yes.
Right. Where it turns out Data is left-handed, then right. No, maybe it was Geordi was left-handed rather than right-handed. And they figured out, wait a minute, he's normally right-handed, but now he's left-handed. So we're still in the simulation. Oh, something like that would happen.
Yep. That's still my show of comfort. I can always throw on Star Trek and enjoy it in the background.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on time here, man, and I know you're a busy man, so I want to respect your time. But of course, I want to leave you an opportunity here to kind of close out talking about the new book. Anything we could know about how to find it, when it's coming out, anything you want to talk about at all?
Conspiracy, whenever you post this, it comes out October 25th, Tuesday. And so it's really in two parts. The first was three parts, really. The first part is why people believe conspiracy theories. So there's a rich body of literature on the psychology, sociology, social psychology, anthropology of conspiracism, why people believe it, what are the factors, race, gender, anxiety, whatever the personality characteristics and so forth. So I review all that and then offer some of my own thoughts on this, kind of a tripartite theory of explanation for why people believe conspiracy theories. One is proxy conspiracism. That is, regardless of the specific conspiracy theory, it is often a proxy for some other deeper concern people have, usually having to do with power. People in power tend to cheat more. And so we should be suspicious of them. And the second is tribal conspiracism. This is what our tribe believes. The election was rigged. I don't know if the election was rigged or not. What do I know? But everybody in my group says it was. So I'm going along with that. Or constructive conspiracism is my third one. That is, as I mentioned before, it pays to be a little bit conspiratorial because some conspiracies are real, right?
Yep.
People really do cheat on their taxes, or corporations cheat on the regulations, or, Watergate, the assassination of President Lincoln. These are all real conspiracy theories. If you read any of the literature about books about the CIA in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, oh my God, Project MK Ultra, where they're, dosing citizens without consent with LSD. What? Mind control experiments, the rigging of the helping to rig elections in South American countries to favor one dictator over another. We apparently preferred fascistic dictators over communist dictators because they were friendlier toward American business interests. Congress didn't approve this. No one even knew they were doing this. Come on, that's a conspiracy. So when people say I'm suspicious of the government, yeah, well, you should be, right? I mean, you look at WikiLeaks and Ed Snowden's revelations. We didn't know a lot of that was going on. In the Obama administration, Mr. Transparency. What? So that's my third one. That really, there's a good reason for why people are so suspicious.
Yeah, I love the quote. I'll just throw this out there real quick that I heard once, and I can't remember who said it, but they said, if you don't think there are conspiracy theories or real conspiracies, you don't think anyone's ever been selfish.
Right. Right, exactly. Yeah.
Michael, I want to thank you again. Like I said at the opening, I really appreciate your time, and this is a real honor to get to chat with you. So thanks for taking the time, man.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for doing what you do. I mean, I love the whole singularity thing. It's fun, even if that specific thing doesn't happen in 2040 or whatever the latest date is. Something's happening, even if it's slow and gradual and takes centuries. It's all pretty cool.
Yeah,
again, all that.
We're going in that direction, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome.